But when it comes to production, you want to know those factors that are either the products or practices that impact soybean yield. And so it was the 6 secrets of soybean success. Yeah, that was actually, we developed that actually in 2012, but now I am happy to say we've worked on soybean long enough that we can rebadge it into the 6 secrets of 80 bushel soybean. So I know 80 bushel isn't outrageous, but it's a target that we're looking at, and it's clearly achievable.
Weather has to be the first one.
Always the first one, Stu. Weather, yeah, and there's a lot of negative weather effects, the wind and hail and drought that impacts it. But one thing that relates to weather, Stu, that we've seen is incredibly important when it comes to high yield soybean is planting date. I don't have to tell you that we've seen a shift to planting soybean before corn, and that is because now that we have premium seed and we got seed treatment, it actually emerges under colder temperatures that we never thought about. And I showed today, again, controlled by the weather, but there's a huge opportunity to increase soybean yield by planting it early.
It was a tremendous difference. It's very significant in what the data that you have.
Yeah, in some cases up to 20 bushels, certainly. And the good news is the seed doesn't cost any different. So the inputs are the same. We're starting to see that. We're starting to see a shift in Illinois. I'm going to tell you about probably Illinois is 50% soybean before corn, and that's been in the last 5 years. And I think in the next couple of years, we're going to see pretty much all the soybean go in before corn. First of all, it makes such a big difference in yield, and we're discovering that corn can be planted later than we thought and still give a really good yield.
Okay, we had the weather and then the planting date, which was a function of that. Genetics are in there.
Yeah, almost as important as weather. I don't think growers realize how large a difference there is in the yield potential among different soybean varieties. They certainly know it for corn, but that range is huge, almost 30 bushels. If you were to look at the difference of yield among frontline commercial soybean varieties, and Stu, it usually comes down to the fullest relative maturity for the region.
So the longer the maturity, then the better the yield.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, and now when it comes down to strictly yield, obviously I think it has something to do with using the whole season. Now, I know all growers can't use full relative maturity. They got to spread out their risk and spread out their harvest. But when it comes to our research, almost always, when you plant early, you got to plant a fuller relative maturity variety. But we also see that the fuller relative maturity variety is also the best when we plant late. And there's a reason for that, Stu. There's a reason that the full relative maturity is the highest and that earlier planting works is because we develop more nodes. When we plant earlier, we get more nodes. When we have a fuller maturity variety, we get more nodes. More nodes gives us the possibility for more pods. More pods gives more seed, and that gives you a higher yield.
That makes a lot of sense. Row spacing.
Yeah, I would have told you before that you need to be in narrow rows to intercept more light. But what we've clearly seen is when we plant early, the row spacing isn't as important. Apparently, when we plant early, the soybean has enough time to capture the light. Now, when we plant late, we need those narrow rows. It would be the exact same thing with populations, Stu. Early planting, you don't need as many plants. Late planting, you want to get that light as fast as possible.
We need to keep these healthy too. So getting rid of fungus, foliar protection is up there.
Yeah, we wondered. We didn't know. We thought, well, maybe we need foliar protection. It's more important if we plant early and have a higher yield. Or maybe there's more disease if we plant late. But what we actually see is the foliar protection has the same value regardless of the planting date. We tend to see 3 to 6 bushels in our research.
The soybeans don't need any fertilizer. They produce their own nitrogen, so they're okay on fertilizer, I assume.
Well, nitrogen they can produce, at least half of it. The other half they get from the soil, but they're still P and K and sulfur. And if you look at corn, the yield produced is directly related to the need for fertilizer. For soybean, it's a different story. Intuitively, you would think, if I plant early and I have a higher yield, I'm going to need more fertility. Now, the plant needs more nutrition, but guess what, Stu? When we plant early, We spread out the time that the plant can acquire its nutrients and it grows slower. We actually see that the need for fertilizer is for late planted soybean. Now, when we increase the yield, we remove more, so we have to worry about maintenance. But fertilizing has a bigger impact on late planted, increasing the yield than early planted. So there are some interesting discoveries, and soybean hasn't given us all its secrets up quite yet.
But when we're planting early, we need to. They get cold. They need a seed treatment on there, so they really need some help.
Yeah, they do.
For an early planted beet.
This makes sense. You know, we look at seed treatments to protect the seed from diseases, insects, and nematodes. And when we plant that crop early, there's a real value to that seed treatment. When we plant late and it emerges quicker, the seed treatment doesn't have as much value.